What if I told you a newborn baby's future was almost traded for less than the price of a used phone and a six-pack of beer? Not in some movie, not decades ago, but in real life, in a quiet American campground where nobody expected anything unusual to happen. Most people think stories like this only exist online or in exaggerated headlines. But this one was so real, so disturbing, that even the police had trouble believing what they were hearing when the first call came in. A witness was shaking, saying two parents were trying to give their baby away like it was unwanted luggage. At first, it sounded like a misunderstanding. Maybe a joke. Maybe a drunk conversation that went too far. But then the details started coming in. A handwritten contract. A price. A stranger willing to take the child. And a baby who had no idea their entire life was being negotiated right in front of them. This wasn't a heated argument or a moment of frustration. According to what authorities would later find, this was planned. Calm. Almost businesslike. Two people who were supposed to protect a tiny human were instead discussing what they could get in return for walking away from him. And what they asked for was what shocked everyone the most. Not thousands of dollars. Not a complicated deal. Just $1,000 and a six-pack of beer. That number alone made the story explode across the internet. Because when people heard it, they all asked the same question: how could a life be valued so cheaply? But the truth behind how this deal started, who was involved, and what really happened at that campground is even more disturbing than the headline. And once you hear what went down next, the way this story ends will stay with you. Darian Urban and Shalene Ehlers didn't look like villains. That's the part that made this story hit so hard. They were young, in their early 20s, and at a glance, they looked like any other couple just trying to survive. The kind of people you'd walk past at a gas station or campground without ever thinking twice. They weren't famous. They weren't wealthy. They didn't have some wild criminal past that made this feel predictable. They were just two people who had a baby way before they were ready, and suddenly, their entire world felt too heavy to carry. People who saw them at the campground later said the same thing. They looked exhausted. Not just tired, but mentally drained. The kind of tired that comes from stress, money problems, and a life that isn't going the way you hoped. They were dealing with a newborn, multiple pets, and nowhere that really felt like home. Everything around them felt unstable. And when life feels like it's closing in, some people don't think clearly. Instead of seeing their baby as someone who needed protection, investigators would later say the couple began seeing him as the thing standing in their way. A responsibility they didn't feel capable of handling. Something that was stopping them from escaping the chaos they were living in. What made it even more disturbing is that this wasn't some sudden emotional breakdown. According to witnesses, the idea of giving the baby away had been floating around for days. At first it sounded like dark jokes. Then it started sounding serious. And then, it became a plan. They talked about it calmly, quietly, like they were discussing a piece of property instead of a human life. That's when desperation crossed into something far more dangerous. Because once they started treating their own child like a problem that could be fixed, it was only a matter of time before someone else stepped in, and what happened next would pull this story into the spotlight in a way they never expected. This didn't happen in some dark alley or hidden warehouse. That's what makes it even more disturbing. It happened in a place meant for rest, laughter, and family trips, a quiet campground near Beaver Lake in Arkansas. During the day, this place looked peaceful. Trees, campfires, kids riding bikes between RVs, couples cooking dinner outside their campers. Nothing about it suggested something horrifying was about to unfold. But once the sun went down, everything changed. That night, Darian and Shalene were sitting near their camper, blending in with everyone else. Other people were drinking, talking, playing music. Nobody was paying attention. That's when the couple allegedly began having conversations that no parent should ever have. They weren't whispering in panic. They weren't crying. They were calmly talking to strangers about their baby. Witnesses later said it felt surreal. One moment, they were enjoying a normal night at the campground, and the next they were hearing someone talk about handing their newborn over like it was nothing. At first, people thought it was a joke. Then they realized it wasn't. One man was reportedly sitting there drinking when the couple approached him. He didn't know them. He didn't know their baby. But they were already talking about giving the child away in exchange for alcohol. And the scariest part? They didn't try to hide it. In a place full of families, under the glow of campfire lights, a deal was being discussed that would change that baby's life forever. But the campground wasn't just the location. It became the reason this story didn't end in tragedy. Because someone nearby was paying attention. And what that person did next would stop everything. This is the part of the story that shocks everyone who hears it. According to authorities, Darian Urban and Shalene Ehlers didn't just casually joke about giving away their baby. They allegedly tried to make it official. They approached a stranger at a campground with a proposal so bizarre it sounded like a dark comedy, if it weren't real. The terms of the deal? $1,000, and a six-pack of beer. That's it. A newborn's life, reduced to a simple exchange of cash and alcohol. At first glance, it's almost impossible to believe. But witnesses and law enforcement later confirmed the details. And it didn't stop there. The couple reportedly handwrote a contract. On paper, they outlined the agreement like this was some kind of business transaction. Some accounts say they even recorded the signing on a cell phone. Proof that the stranger agreed to take full responsibility for a baby they had brought into the world. Imagine the scene. A calm night at a quiet campground. Families laughing around campfires. And there, in the shadows, a young couple discussing handing their child over as if it were a piece of property. No panic. No tears. Just quiet, methodical planning. The stranger they approached had no connection to them. No family ties. No reason to be involved. Just an ordinary man, suddenly placed in one of the most disturbing situations imaginable. Witnesses later described him as frozen, unsure whether he was hearing a joke, and realizing, piece by piece, that the baby's life was genuinely on the line. What makes this story even more chilling is how matter-of-fact the couple appeared. There were no emotional outbursts, no pleading or hesitation. Just two people calmly talking about what they wanted in return for abandoning their child. And the handwritten contract? That's what makes it feel almost surreal. In neat, legible writing, they allegedly documented terms, conditions. To anyone who saw it, the contrast between the baby's innocence and the coldness of the deal was horrifying. But the plan didn't go unnoticed. A witness stepped in, shocked and alarmed, setting off a chain reaction that would ensure authorities were called and the deal never went through. That moment, that intervention, became the line between tragedy and survival. It's the kind of story that sticks with you. The thought of a life being weighed against money and beer feels impossible, yet it really happened. And what happened after the deal was proposed, the investigation, the charges, and the public outrage, would prove just how far desperation, or something darker, can push people. Because once a plan like this is set in motion, there's no going back, and the consequences would be devastating for everyone involved. The night of the alleged deal, the campground was supposed to be a place of relaxation, laughter, and family time. But instead, it became the backdrop for something almost unbelievable. Witnesses later described the scene as surreal, like watching a nightmare unfold in broad daylight. One visitor, sitting near a campfire with friends, noticed the young couple approaching a man they didn't know. At first, it seemed harmless, just another conversation. But the words they were exchanging quickly made it clear something was very wrong. They were talking about giving away their baby. Not jokingly, not hypothetically, seriously, calmly, matter-of-factly. Another witness reported hearing details about the baby's age, how he was cared for, and the price they were expecting. The entire campground reportedly froze. People were unsure whether to intervene, call for help, or even believe what they were hearing. But as the conversation continued, it became impossible to ignore. What's even more chilling is the baby's condition. According to authorities, the infant was being handled casually, not in a protective, loving way, but as if he were an object that could be handed over. Small signs of neglect were reportedly visible. A baby left in a car seat without proper supervision, wrapped loosely, while adults debated the terms of a transaction. Some witnesses later described trying to stay calm, pretending not to notice while secretly calling law enforcement. Others confronted the couple directly, but the couple allegedly remained calm, almost eerily so. No panic, no tears, no hesitation. Just a quiet confidence that the deal could happen. Authorities would later state that the witnesses' quick thinking and willingness to report the situation prevented what could have become a real tragedy. Their observations, recorded statements, and even videos from cell phones helped law enforcement piece together exactly what happened, and that evidence would be crucial in holding the couple accountable. This moment shows how small actions, noticing something unusual, Paying attention to your surroundings, stepping in when something feels wrong, can change the course of a life. And in this case, it literally saved a newborn from being placed in harm's way. But the story doesn't end there. What authorities discovered during the investigation, and the charges eventually brought against the couple, would shock the public even further. Because the deal, as bizarre as it seemed, was only the beginning of a chain of events that revealed deeper negligence and alarming disregard for a child's safety. And what happened next, the legal fallout and eventual sentencing, would finally answer the question everyone was asking. How could something like this even happen in the first place? Once authorities were alerted, what seemed like a bizarre campground story turned into a full-blown criminal investigation. Deputies arrived quickly, and the first thing they did was ensure the baby was safe. That tiny infant, unaware of the chaos swirling around him, became the center of a complex case that would shock the nation. Investigators immediately began piecing together what had happened. Witness statements, cell phone videos, and even the alleged handwritten contract were collected as evidence. Every detail mattered: who the couple approached, what they said, and how they handled the baby. Each piece painted a picture far worse than anyone had imagined. The charges were serious. Darian Urban and Shalene Ehlers faced accusations of creating a substantial risk of harm to a child, neglect, and attempting to unlawfully transfer custody. Authorities stressed that this wasn't a simple case of poor judgment. It was a deliberate attempt to put a vulnerable infant in the hands of strangers. Court documents revealed that the investigation uncovered a troubling pattern. The couple had not only considered handing the baby to a stranger for money and alcohol, but had also thought about multiple options for getting rid of the child. Witnesses testified that they appeared calm and methodical, as if planning something entirely normal. Law enforcement officials also noted how crucial the campground witnesses were. Without their quick thinking and willingness to step forward, the investigation might have been delayed, and the situation could have escalated into something far more dangerous. The evidence they provided helped prosecutors build a strong case, showing that this was premeditated and deliberate. Ultimately, the investigation exposed just how far the couple was willing to go. What started as a bizarre conversation under campfire lights became a legal battle with very real consequences. The charges were not just about the money or the beer. They were about protecting a life and holding two parents accountable for the choices they made. And as the couple awaited trial, the public followed every development with shock and disbelief, struggling to understand how anyone could treat their own child with such disregard. The courtroom would later reveal the final consequences. Punishments that reflected both the severity of the acts and the narrow escape of the baby who, thanks to vigilant witnesses, would grow up far from the dangers of that night. After a shocking investigation and intense media coverage, the case finally moved into the courtroom. Darian Urban and Shalene Ehlers faced the consequences of a decision that almost changed a newborn's life forever. The nation watched as the legal system delivered its judgment. Darian Urban accepted a plea deal. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison, with another 3 years suspended. The court emphasized that his actions weren't just reckless, they were deliberate, putting a child at serious risk. It was a punishment that reflected both accountability and the seriousness of the crime. Shalene Ehlers, on the other hand, received a lighter outcome: 6 years of state-supervised probation. The court considered her cooperation with authorities and other mitigating factors, but the verdict still served as a warning. The law doesn't take the safety of a child lightly. The baby, the real center of this story, was placed in the care of the Arkansas Department of Human Services. Authorities made it clear the parents were prohibited from contacting the child. That tiny infant, once almost traded for money and alcohol, would now grow up in a safer environment, far from the chaos of that fateful night. The case left a lasting impression on the public. People couldn't stop asking, how could a young couple even consider such an act? And what lessons could be learned from this near tragedy? For authorities and social workers, it was a reminder of how crucial vigilance is. A single witness noticing something wrong made the difference between danger and safety. Beyond the legal consequences, the story sparked debates online and in communities about responsibility, desperation, and the value of life. It reminded everyone that even in seemingly ordinary lives, choices can have extraordinary impacts. In the end, justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about protecting the most vulnerable, ensuring that one small life could continue safely while holding those responsible accountable. The consequences were real, permanent, and sobering, a stark reminder that even a moment of reckless thinking can echo far beyond a single night.